Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to work through a LeetCode question called Ransom Note. Before we get started, if you could just drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already, that would help us out a lot. We will be doing a lot more of these LeetCode tutorials, mock interviews, and we also have a Learn to Code series with a mechanical engineer who's trying to improve his software skills. So for today's question, we have Ransom Note. It's a pretty popular LeetCode question. And the idea with this one is that we're given two strings, a ransom note and a magazine, and they each have lowercase characters, and your job is to return true or false if the ransom note can be constructed using only characters found in the magazine. So a couple things and edge cases to look out for is that you have to make sure you handle duplicates. So for this example here, we have A in both of them, but we have two A's in the first and only one in the second, so that should return false. And we also, basically what you can think of is we have to have some counts going on here. So that's something that should kind of jump at you right away, is that because of this case where we have to handle duplicates, it's not good enough just to loop through all the characters in our note and see if they exist in magazine, because if you did that, for example, then this example down here would return true. So when you have to deal with duplicates, generally you want to use a hash map. But let's say initially you didn't come to that conclusion, you didn't recognize that we had some counting going on, and you thought that we can basically loop through all the characters in our note, and as we come across a character, we can just remove that from our magazine. Because that way, if the remove is successful, then we know we can continue on. And if we get to the end of our note and we've removed all the characters with success from our magazine, then we know that we can construct our ransom note from our magazine. So to get started with that, we can basically just code up what we just talked about there. So we can just loop through our note. So for letter in note. So now for every letter, we just want to basically first check if that letter is found in the magazine. Because if it's not, then we know that the note cannot be constructed with the magazine. So if the letter is in the magazine, we will do something. Otherwise, we can just immediately return false. So now if our letter is in our magazine, then what we can think of is, like I just mentioned, removing it, right? So all we do with that in Python is we can just say mag equals our magazine.replace, and we'll replace an occurrence of our letter with an empty string, and we only want to do that one time. So this is very important here. We want to make sure that we're only doing the first, basically if you think of looping through the magazine to find that character, we only want to remove the first instance of that character. So with this solution here, at the very end, if we get through all of the letters in our note, then we can basically return true. All right, so why don't we just go ahead and run this. And we see that with our test cases here, we have two falses and a true, which is what we expect. So now for the runtime for this, if you didn't know that this replace was O of n itself, then you may initially think that this is an O of n operation with no extra space. But in reality, under the hood, this dot replace is an O of n operation. And then we have that nested within our O of n for loop here. So I guess unfortunately, if you weren't aware of how that replace works, you would probably, if the interviewer asked you what was the runtime of this, then you would initially say O of n, you'd be incorrect. And that's why it's very important to know that when you use these built-in methods, even though they make the code look cleaner to the human eye and looking at it, a lot of times under the hood, if you're not super familiar, then you can kind of the runtime can get carried away here. So we basically have an O of n squared solution here, and we basically now want to say, all right, is there a way to get this in O of n time? So if you remember at the beginning, I mentioned that a lot of times when you're dealing with these basically counting characters or counting elements, one thing you can do is just create a hash map of the element in their count. So in Python, we can actually use the collections library, and we can just say that we have our note count and our magazine count, and we can set that equal to a counter of our note, and then our magazine count will be very similar, but it will just be a counter of our magazine. So now what we just did is we basically populated two dictionaries, or two hash maps, whatever you want to call them, that have all the letters in our note in the amount of occurrences, and then the same thing for the magazine. So what you can think of now is we can just loop through the note count that we just created, because that's going to be what's driving our solution, because we want to see if the characters found in our note are found in the magazine with the correct amount of occurrences. So we can say for the letter in our note count. So this will loop through the keys of this counter. That's very important to note, is that this is going to still be characters, and then at that index in the map, we basically will have the total amount of occurrences in the string. So what are our fail conditions? We can basically say that if our letter is not in our magazine count, meaning that if we tried to look up the character that is found in the note in the magazine, it returns false, then we would want to return false because the note cannot be constructed. And also, if at any point the count in the note, so that basically if in this example here we have two A's, so at note count of A we would get 2. If that value at that index is greater than the value at the same index in the other count, then we want to return false. So those are basically the only two fail conditions we have here. So we can just say if letter not in mag count, or if the note count at that letter is greater than the magazine count of that letter. And then if we are able to successfully go through all of this, then we can just return true. So when we go ahead and run this and test it out, see if we have any bugs, and we get what we expect here. So previously we had used that replace, which gave us an O of n squared operation. But here, this is the only thing that's going to be on order n, is looping through here. We basically have to construct O of n plus m space, which is just all the characters in both the note and the magazine, to create these two dictionaries. But now we've reduced our runtime to O of n. And I guess as a sort of fun thing you can do with Python here, we can actually just return the difference between the two maps that we're creating. So we can actually just return the note count minus the mag count, and then the inverse of that, because if you think about it, what we want here is if this returns an empty map, then that means that we could successfully build our note with our magazine. So for this example here, this would be a dictionary of size 1 with A and 2 as the value, where here we have a dictionary of length 2 with A and 2 and B and 1, but because we're taking A and 2 and subtracting that with A and 2, that'll give us an empty dictionary and allow us to return true. So this was a few examples. If you can think of any other examples, then definitely leave them in the comments below, and thank you very much.